I mean, you know, the president ends the year, and we always do these year-end approval polls. He's underwater 43-55 in the new ABC News Washington Post poll, which, of course, has led to the favorite media pastime of comparing President Obama to President Bush and to President Clinton, but particularly to Bush. And Jonathan Chait, I thought, had a really smart take on this. And he says, Barack Obama is not George W. Bush, clearly. The Bush comparisons state or imply broader forces at work than mere sagging approval ratings. This is just a presidency that has hit a new inflection point beyond which its credibility is severed and its agenda broken. And that conclusion falls apart because it completely misses how power works in the Obama era. Did you concur with that?
I mean, I think that's really interesting, and I think that the president going into the 2014 elections does have an opportunity, really. I mean, with the budget out of the way, that does sort of excuse me, open up an opportunity for Democrats and Republicans to kind of fight it out over what their priorities want to be. And I think that that's what we're going to see in January and February. We'll hear a lot more about immigration reform, I think, too, that'll be something that'll come up.
But, I mean, isn't there a sense, Karen, and that presidencies, in a sense, they go along a timeline, and there is a certain point at which the media is done with you, right? Right? And at which they're so focused on sort of the next president that you're now fighting a narrative that is sort of set against you anyway. Any mistake? I mean, George W. Bush in his last 3 years of his term was not running again. There was really nothing to be done that was exciting. It was seen as his agenda was over, and of course, Katrina, right? So there is sort of a presidency against the narrative that happens too.
No, I think that's right. Look, I think part of what happens is the reporters who have been covering the president for, 6, 7 years, the longer it goes, they know the stories, right? There's nothing new. It's like when you see the third sequel to a movie, right? And there's a little bit of laziness, I think. I mean, why is it that with regard to health care, we have had all this obsession about a website rather than talking about the actual policy in and of itself, or talking about, what's good in the policy, what's not good in the policy.
Medicaid expansion.
How about let's do... So I do think you're right that there is a narrative that sets in, and it's an obvious, easy comparison to look at the numbers, who was the last one. I mean, I think you see this pretty much every time we get to this point in a presidency.
I think there's been a focus on the website for two good reasons. One is that it was a huge failure of competence on the part of the administration. They thought this thing was going to launch in a way that was basically working. But is that the best metric to say whether or not in 20 years healthcare reform will be a success? No, but it's a good metric for understanding why the president's poll numbers have fallen, and it's a good metric for also understanding why he's taken a hit to his credibility. It's not just the job approval numbers that have fallen, it's also the personal favorability numbers, the honest and trustworthy
and the
numbers.
Environment. Right, because, and it's in this environment. So, but I do have that question that Karen had, Matt, is whether or not we're sort of losing the forest for the trees, in the sense that when kids are reading about the Affordable Care Act in history, I somehow doubt that the website will be the most prominent thing, because it's the overall trajectory of the policy that long-term matters. It's harder to cover, obviously. That is something that the president, short-term, really can't stop fighting.
That is true. And it's also true that I think reporters have a tendency to sort of get bored with the president who's been around for too long when he's not running again. It's not as politically interesting. But to stand up for George W. Bush for a moment, a lot of significant things happened in his second term. I mean, there was an important stimulus bill that was passed. There was a minimum wage bill that came through in a kind of compromise. There were these enormous bailouts associated with the TARP. I mean, those weren't popular things. There wasn't a ton of attention paid to them. There was this major Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac legislation that nobody noticed at the time, but has really structured the housing market in years to come. And so by the same token, I mean, important things will be happening in the Obama administration, whether he's popular or not, whether reporters care about it or not, and it's worth trying to care a little bit about, for example, the EPA. There's going to be some major regulations.
And what's happening with Gitmo, et cetera. And I also am struck by the fact that this president has been sort of declared down and out before, right? After the shellacking in the 2010 midterms, we had another moment where it was said, okay, well, the agenda is over. It's all done. And then you had this incredible lame duck Congress at the end of 2010 that got through Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, that got through the START treaty, that got a lot done. So for Democrats as well as for the president, is sort of this kind of, the president being sort of in the doghouse a little bit in terms of public perception. That doesn't necessarily mean nothing is going to happen, right?
No, Democrats have their priorities, and Republicans actually have priorities too. And I think that what has happened over the last 3 years, a lot with the Republican obstruction, especially in the House, people have grown really weary of that, very tired, and so they've taken a hit as well in terms of not being able to get stuff done. Boehner doesn't necessarily want to go out being known as the guy that couldn't do anything. That's not that's not how he wants to lead. I don't know if he's leaving.
I think it might be a little bit too late for that.
But there is still time for them to accomplish bigger things. I just don't know exactly.
Okay, very quick lightning round. Do we have another shutdown showdown? Yes or no?
No.
Shutdown showdown?
Yeah, I will never say that we wouldn't, because I don't trust these guys.
Shutdown
yes,
showdown.
in February over the debt ceiling.
Shutdown showdown.
Not in the next 2 years.
All right, very interesting. All right, coming up, thank you very much, guys. And coming up, in a world of instant gratification, lack of self-control, self-control comes at a premium. And we'll talk with Deepak Chopra about the mind-body connection in his new book when he joins us next.